Glenbrook North High School. How are you?
Great.
And you're here at TCEA, and the Glenbrook North High School is nowhere near Texas. Where is that located?
It's located way up north in Chicago, Illinois, just off Lake Michigan.
Okay, and why were you here? Why are you here at TCEA?
I'm actually here because I was invited to come down, and they recreated a space that we designed at Glenbrook North here at TCEA. So I'm here talking about learning spaces.
What is a learning space? What's that about?
Well, when I look at a learning space, I look at how the transition from the traditional model of a classroom where we got the 6x5 grid, we have rows, desks, all facing the front of a classroom. How do we transition that off to a space that's more about empowering the learner, moving away from occupancy-based to learner-based?
And so you talked yesterday about some trends away from the traditional learning space, like you just said. What are some things that you've done back in Illinois on those learning spaces?
Well, I think one of the things we did was, how do we create a space that's for all learners and get away from artificial barriers that said, well, this is a space that's for only teachers or only for students. We wanted a space where everyone could come together, a magnetic space that drew people in, and really was based on some of the foundational cores that we talk about today with collaboration, creating, empowering students, empowering learners. Flexibility has been key. And one of the big pieces is, how do you create this magnetic space that people are drawn to, that want to gather? You look at coffee houses, you look at Apple, you look at Google.
Right.
What draws people in? It's this feeling of, I want to be there. I want to be part of whatever's happening there.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the difference. What's the difference between let's say a coffee house or an Apple store, and I know it kind of sounds weird, but a traditional classroom? What makes an Apple store work the way it does as opposed to a traditional classroom where you got rows of seats?
Well, I think that was it's funny, that's one of the core questions that came to me is, why do you want to create this space? What's the difference between there and here? And it required you to go there. You literally have to sit in those spaces. And I took my administrative team, we sat in Apple, we went to Google, we sat in a coffee shop and understood. And there's just this air, this aura of, hey, we're here together, we're debating issues, we're talking about ideas, we're moving the space the way we want. And when you walk into these spaces, there's nothing's defined like it is in schools. Well, this is where kids go sit.
Right.
This is where we teach. This is where we learn. You walk in and it's being defined by the user at the moment they need it. And I think that's a big piece that when I go in any of these spaces, there's an energy, there's a passion, but there's also, it's just being inhabited. It's not being defined. I think we have this problem where adults, we want to define a space.
Right.
Say, this is how you use it.
A person in the front of the room is the leader of the pack. And,
exactly.
Right.
Everyone else sits here, or everyone else does this. Where these spaces are, we just inhabit them and we define them as we go.
So that seems to me to require quite a mind shift on the part of the adults. Probably not so much of the kids, especially if they're little kids, but for the adults, it takes a whole paradigm changing idea there. Instead of I'm in front of the room leading the class, whereas I'm just part of the room, I'm just part of the flow of the room.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you address that? How do you talk to the adults about that?
Well, I think it was really getting away from a mindset. That's why we went to coffee houses and Google and Apple, to get them away from, let's not talk about school. Let's not talk about formal education in that sense. Let's just talk about how people learn. And when we walked around, we started observing people, we started to get the feel, well, that's how I learn. Okay, well, if that's how you learn and that's how you function, how do your classrooms function? Well, not so much the same way.
Right.
Well, why are we disconnecting that way? Why do we feel this is how we learn outside of school and this is how we're supposed to learn in school?
Right.
And when we started to bridge that gap, we really started to make some headway into a learning space.
Now, you talked about that what they did here at the Web 2.0 area was that they kind of recreated some of your ideas.
Correct.
Can you walk us through and kind of let's talk about some of those ideas that you guys were talking about? What I know it's hard to recreate a classroom at a conference center, but what are some of the things that you set up?
Well, I think you can see from here a lot of spaces where you can write on, and you'll listen to our teachers, our students, anyone in the school. They'll say the best technology is actually the whiteboard space, because we're constantly.
There's a whole lot of it. Let's go ahead and walk over there. Let's go see what we got there. So.
He's up there.
So here's a space where people are constantly engaging in ideas. In fact, you'll see people write ideas up on the wall, and 2 days later, new ideas are forming from other people.
Okay.
No one owns those ideas. We're just constantly in a state of sharing. We put up on the wall, share your favorite learning app. What's an app that you think we should all be using?
Right.
And we'll have a poll like this, completely full of ideas from students, teachers, administrators, anyone that walks by.
Right.
So you'll also see that we have this support area. There's no front to this space.
So that's kind of like the Genius Bar over at an Apple store, I guess, right?
Correct. So
Right.
we constantly have this ability to have ongoing support. You want to explore an idea, you need assistance with an idea, you want to work with someone, pull up a seat at the bar, hang out and learn. And there's students there, there's teachers there. And the other thing you'll notice, there's no front to this room.
Yeah.
You can't really identify a front because, again, we're not trying to lock ourselves into anything. We want a very flexible, dynamic space that allows us to reconfigure any way we want.
So, okay, so like, let's say this is a classroom. Okay, this requires some money, does it not, to
Absolutely.
reconfigure a traditional classroom? Because, like, I'd say 99% of all classrooms in the U.S. are set up to be tables, chairs, the student desk,
Correct.
the teacher's desk. And so, in these budget times, is it difficult to convince people to go this way?
It is. You have to set up a model. I think the big thing for us was create a model and showcase how this could make a difference. And
Right.
we really did with the idea, the innovation, discovery, and engagement area. We created a model where people come in, excuse me, and they're seeing a difference. And because of that, we start going, is this what's needed? We created it as the fourth pillar. You have curriculum, you have instruction, you have assessment.
Right.
Well, space design comes in as well. You have to make that a part of those four cores. And yes, budget's a big issue, but what are incremental steps that we can make to really make this happen? Idea paint. I can take this whiteboard paint and I can paint tabletops. So now those classroom desks extend, and those ideas get every period of students coming in gets to see the ideas and the thinking going on. So there's small steps you can take as well.
So I remember I was listening to Prakash Nair speak, and he said that it's very interesting to him that they'll spend $30 million building a high school, or $40 million building a high school, and buy $30 plastic chairs to put kids in.
Absolutely.
And did you address the actual furniture itself when you started looking at your learning space, or are we still using $30 plastic chairs?
No, we designed with intent. We actually sat down and said, what kind of chairs would learners feel comfortable? Not students, learners. And when adults started sitting in hard chairs and chairs that were bending and twisting, no, I don't want to sit in that. Okay, well, what do you want to sit in? And we started showing different seats, and next thing you know, we found really comfortable seating, padded, the ability to move, to adjust the backing on it.
Right.
I said, okay, why? Let's do it. Let's put these in this room because this is a model. So furniture was a huge thing. We have comfortable seating in the center. We call it a thought lounge. So there's couches, there's nice executive chairs actually in our formal professional development portion of it. And all of that makes a huge difference. It's comfort. When you design for people and you design for pedagogy, you start to see a big difference.
So who's listening? You've been doing this. Who's been listening to you?
A lot. I'm down here in Texas. Here I am from Chicago, down here in Texas. So
Yeah, so Texans are listening to you.
Texans are listening. I've spoken at Apple and to an executive briefing of superintendents around the Midwest about spaces. So there's a lot of interest in spaces. My concern right now is, are we going to be in another knowing-doing gap? We know what we should do, but we're not doing it.
Right.
We know we need to align our habitats with if we're going to get the desired habits. But here we are. We know a lot, but who's doing it?
That's a great question. Ryan, thanks a lot for talking with us this morning.
Thank you.
Say hi to El Paso, Texas.
Hey, El Paso.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.